Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. Uh, I am Mifune, and this is Caleb. And today, we've come here to talk to you about dirty money, botting in EVE Online on the first ever Push to Talk Extra. How do you feel about this, Caleb? You
Uh,
excited?
I'm, I'm, I think I told you already. Well, one of the things that made us want to do this is actually a post that was a little bit of a hit piece that was published on Reddit a while ago. Um, that was screaming bloody murder about the botting empires and how it was destroying. Even this is something that comes up all the time, but I just got this whole feeling of deja vu because this is so similar to some of the things that were happening during the first casino war, right? We are currently in the second casino war, so I'm inclined to call it the second dirty money war because I do feel like there's some of that actually happening. Of course, we can't prove anything, but we wanted to actually cover the topic and talk about uh, illegit ways of actually gaming, and we wanted to take it a bit further than just Eve Online because it's such a it's such a big topic, and I basically approached you, Mifune, and we talked about this, and you just happened to be so interested in this already, so you went and dug into all the research and I think we're going to have a very interesting show for you today.
So, some disclaimers that I want to touch on first. First disclaimer: we are not blaming anybody. This is not any kind of spin. Okay, I'm not saying this alliance bots, that alliance bots, whatever. It doesn't matter what alliance is botting. The fact that we have botting in our game is a problem in itself, and it's something that New Eden has to come together for and break as a whole. I mean, and Caleb, I think I speak for all of Eve. Eve is, I think we had this last night on Theta Thursday. Eve is such a diverse amount of people. We have people in all kinds of fields, and if we put everybody's thinker together, we could solve that problem.
Yeah, and this is why I said this is very similar to what happened the last time around, right? Because the last time it was about gambling, and of course it happened when gambling was a big topic and being discussed legally because of other games as well, and the early versions of loot boxes and all that stuff. And we've had gambling in one way or another in Eve Online pretty much almost from day one. The first one on scale was BIG, the big lottery that was done by a character called Tornstole. I'm pretty sure he started it in 2004. So we've had gambling in Eve all the way back to the beginning. We also very early on we got this EOH poker where you could actually play poker for ISK, and a lot of these things were seen, at least from CCP side, as content because it really does add content to a game like Eve Online, which is a big sandbox simulation. So it's a feature, but it became a problem because of the scale that started to hit when we hit the casino war, and the fact that, well, of course, we shouldn't dig too deep into the casino war history, but I just think it's funny that the main reason that it became a problem was because of personal issues, shenanigans. So it was private drama. It was not really because it was a problem to the game or to the game developers. They had been asked many times, is this supposed to be legal? Should we really allow this? And of course, the players were split in people that liked it because it added that whole, call it meta layer and ambiance in the game. And then, of course, the people that saw it as a potential problem because gambling and gambling addiction can actually be a massive problem. And it was to some people, and especially when it's scaled to the I want ISK scale. So CCP decided that no, this is not a good idea. And then, of course, there was the fact that first Soma Blink were doing not so legal stuff and got banned for, I think it was actually RMT. And of course, I want ISK was also found guilty of illegal behavior and RMT. It was also admitted recently on an interview on Twitch.
Right. And so some of the topics that we wanted to cover for you today is uh, basically explanation of how the bots like kind of work, kind of like the background stuff of what goes on and stuff, and then we want to branch into how other games have had problems with botting and cheating, and how those games handled their botting problem and their cheating problem, and then after that branch into CCP, what CCP can do, what CCP is doing, things like that. And so we just kind of me and Caleb have been researching for the past like week and a half on all of this. And no, we're not computer professionals. I'm not in college for computer engineering. So if I say something that doesn't make sense to someone who has been in college for that, I'm going to apologize right off the bat for that. Um,
Uh, Chat is saying you're a bit low audio
am I?
wise. Yeah, just take you up a little bit.
How about now? Am I Gucci now?
Well, and again, it to me it started with the history back with the casino wars, right? And of course, botting and automation and sweatshopping or whatever it is has been a part of gaming pretty much since day one. And I was kind of inspired by some of the things that you've been dabbling with before you came to EVE Online, Mifune.
Yes. So should I start, Caleb? You think? Am I huge?
Just take it.
Oh,
Just take
hey,
it
just
from,
take
from
it.
what we
Okay.
call the top, right?
All right. Yeah. All right. All right. Let me take you from the top here, guys. Okay. So basically, to understand how to beat these things, you need to understand how they work, right? So one of the big points that I want to make, and I'm sorry that I'm holding my mouse here because I have to hold my push talk button, but imagine my left hand here is the game. It could be any game. It doesn't have to be. It could be any game. Here is your external botting program, right? And your external botting program is going to glue itself on top of the game, and that is how mainly bots work off of, right? They see through gluing themselves to the game. And some of the points I want to bring up is that when you open like Chrome or something, and Chrome puts itself on top of another program or whatever, right? So there are anti-cheating measures that certain games have taken that kind of, instead of it gluing itself to the game, it just kind of passes through the game. And then when the botting program tries to do something, it can't do it because it's behind the game instead of in front of the game. If that makes sense. I know it's a hard visual to make, but that's a method that I have seen other games use for issues like that. And that's kind of the general gist of how bots work. That's the screen sketch, right? So what you call it? I'm trying to think where my train of thought is going here. So pretty much that's how they work, and usually you have something like a CMD menu open that you select your options and whatever. That's how they work. Now I hate to like move on so quickly, but there's a lot to cover on how other games that have had this issue, right?
Yeah, what
So
are they actually primarily used for?
farming,
But yeah, because
they're
there's both
farming.
farming and then there's the more uh, active cheats, right?
Well,
But they're
yes.
both
So
bots.
they're both bots, right? And there are some cheats out there, like Counter Strike, FPS games. There are cheats to gain the advantage, right? And the primary, I guess you could say, primary function of botting in MMO and RPG type games is to grind. You know, you sit there for 4 or 5 hours in your Myrmidon ratting, and some idiot wants to go to work or something and and make money in his game or whatever. So he bots, and that's what they do, is to gain an unfair advantage by farming.
And it's such a it's almost like three different categories, right? And they are fairly close to, well, they evolve almost from what you would call legality, right? Because if you take something like the aim bots and things like that, that gives you these advantages live in the game. They're almost in the same family as overlays, right? And then you
Yes.
got the second one, which I call the multi-boxing scalability with input replication and basically aiding you even further with automation to do something that could also again be almost legal. And then of course the last and the worst one, where it's pretty much fully automated all the activities in the game, which is basically for sweatshops and grinding. Sweatshops, of course, would usually have an actual live person doing it, but here it's just swapped completely with automation. Because a sweatshop is fundamentally legal, right? If you pay someone in the third world a dollar per hour for grinding for you in World of Warcraft, which was a big problem back when gold selling was massive. This is legal. Fundamentally, it's legal. It's not legal to sell the currency, but having these people work for you is actually fundamentally legal.
Well, Caleb just is about to branch me into this. This is one thing. Now I'm going to say this right now. What I'm about to talk about, is a solution, a semi solution to what CCP can take action on. Like, if you're thinking, what can CCP do tomorrow that would help the botting problem? This is one of them, and it is suing the developers of these botting and cheating programs. And it's something that has been done in the past with a multitude of games. And this is part of my research. So in 2011, and it may not work, you can argue that I'm not the best person at this. Exactly. So the thing is that I think it's 2011, I would say, maybe 2015. It happened twice with it, but World of Warcraft Blizzard's China division actually sued a legitimized Chinese company that was designed to gold farm for World of Warcraft, and they sued them on the fact that their company was illegitimized in some way. I don't know how they did it, but they did do it, and they won, and that company had to be shut down. So they won, right? And then in 2019, a 17-year-old kid, and I'm going to stress this, 17 years old, got sued by Epic Games for creating and selling a cheat for Fortnite. And that has happened. And just recently, August 12th, 2020, a team of 8 guys from Oregon all got sued by Activision for making and selling cheats for Call of Duty. It is a thing. It is possible. Now, whether or not CCP has the means to do it, they could hire lawyers. That costs a lot of money. It may not work, but it's an option, and it's something
and you do get quite far just by the threat of
exactly
a traditional cease and desist, right? Because especially because many of these things are done with some sort of income, right? So there is actually money involved, and if there is money involved, you basically just need the IP. Fundamentally, if it wasn't because of the fair use, every Eve Media website could actually be closed with a simple cease and desist, because we are only allowed to use the Eve IP because we're doing it under a fair use and by following the guidelines of CCP. But they do have the legal right to shut us down from day to day if they want to, because it's still their IP. And as long as there's anything that is contained within the entirety of the Eve IP, so whether it's quotes from the Chronicles or artwork or even just the logo, they can shut you down in a day.
exactly. Like if see, like I'm not going to. I don't want to assume things because I want to stick to like what is hardcore known. But if CCP has the resources and if they have the money to afford the lawyers, they can do it. And even if it doesn't work, like Caleb said, something as simple as a DMCA is enough to scare these guys away. I've seen it time and time again. There are so many cheaters out there that can get scared by the slightest chance of them getting into legal trouble.
Well, again, someone said you can't sue people for making bots. Well, first of all,
You can.
you are abusing and you're causing economic damage to the actual game developer. So that in itself is at least something that you can take up legally. But the other one is if there is anything inside the code or the way that the code actually operates that breaches and uses the IP in any shape or form. Let's just say it uses a screenshot
Or-
to actually position the input stuff. That is actually illegal. Messing with the running game is illegal, or at least it is tiptoeing on legality.
And to clear things up, when I was doing my research, and I have this in my notes, when it came to the 2017 suing of the 17-year-old kid that sold Fortnite cheats, when Epic Games sued him, they did not sue him for EULA. His cheat was built internally, so it modified the game's code, and they sued him from the terms of service for reverse engineering the game. And it has worked, because with the 3 examples that I listed, they won. Blizzard won their lawsuit, Epic Games won their lawsuit, Activision just won their lawsuit. They will win against that. So it's a thing. It's possible.
But of course, it's very different from. There's different ways of doing this. There's different degrees of what you would call. Well, let's just call it criminality for our own ease, right? But if you're using something like a simple injection stuff, of course, it's very, very difficult to first of all catch you because it's something that most script kiddies can do themselves, right? So there's a lot of these things that are not out in the what you would call, and I know that Mifune told me about the whole massive difference between public and private bots, and especially how you pay for these, depending on what type it is. So it's just a massive market of all these different types of things, and the ecosystem of what you would call cheating is also tied in with all the legal stuff, right? Because as Mifune pointed out before we started the show, there's often ties between the professional gamers and many of these, if not directly cheats, then at least the things that are related to monetizing on the whole gaming experience. So all these things are tied together, whether you're talking professional gamers, sweatshoppers, bot coders, all of these things are like tied together in this big virtual currency ecosystem, right? And it goes from professional sponsors and stuff like that, and all the way down to things like RMT. This is about where are the money, who gets the money, and how are they cycled around, right? The majority should go to the developer, but that's not always the case, especially when you start talking about a very old game.
Exactly. And I guess one of the things I can branch off into this is the cheating market. I'm going to stress this right here and now. In this entire stream, we do not encourage botting. This is against botting. But the market with cheating in video games in general, not just EVE, and this is going to be a broad topic that I'm going to branch out to here, that is all games, all video games. The cheating market is a very lucrative market. I doubt, and I severely doubt, there is a free cheat bot whatever that will not get you banned. It is a known fact in the cheating community that any kind of thing that's free will get you banned in whatever game you're cheating in.
And this brings on what we talked about with the arms race, right? This is always an arms race with the developer and with the outsourced developers of counters to botting and automation, right? So this war is always going on, and there is hardly, well, if you are getting something for free, it's most likely going to be something that the developer and the anti-botting businesses can actually figure out in a second, right? So this is not where you're gonna be able to operate easily. You are most likely going to be banned by just turning it on the first time around. So you need to go to those other places where the arms race is actually working. But again, this is back to why some game developers in history has actually tried to scale back some of their aggressive anti-botting activities. I think we talked about how World of Warcraft used to have was it Vanguard? That was
They no. So what World of Warcraft has now is a system called Warden, and Warden is one of what I am going to classify as high end anti cheats. There's kind of like the low end, and then there's the anti cheats that go above and beyond to prevent cheating. And I'll get more into those as I get into my little note segment of anti cheat options. But the thing is that you have things like Warden, Battle Eye, Easy Anti Cheat. We've all heard the names before. If you play a game other than Eve, you've probably heard of one of those three. They're third party anti cheats. And what they do is they run on your computer, and when you are playing the game, it is constantly scanning the list of active processes. It's practically scanning your task manager, if you will. It's practically scanning that for foreign programs. And those foreign programs are mainly like cheating programs. If you are running a known cheating program, these anti cheats are going to know you're running them. And when they realize that you're running them, it's going to stop. And yes, easy anti cheat is trash, but I'm trying to simplify this. Okay? Like, exactly, it's client side scanning. And I'm trying to simplify this. As much as some of us know that easy anti-cheat is absolutely garbage and can be broken very easily, but that's not the point. The point is that you have these group of anti-cheats that scan your system.
I think we need to point out to chat that we're trying to keep this in the ELI 5 mode. Also, we don't want to be blamed for actually helping people, because this is supposed to be an anti-botting program. So let's not get into the weeds and all the details. We know that you guys might be extremely brainy coder dudes that actually know a fuck ton more about this than we actually do. We're just trying to cover this as how it impacts the games, and especially how it impacts EVE Online and our game experiences.
So with that, I guess I'll, as you said, because my thoughts are all over the place, start with kind of from the top, and I guess I'll kind of just go over some of these anti-cheating methods. And for all I know, hope to God CCP maybe is watching this and gets an idea somewhere, because that's kind of my goal, is maybe somebody learns something new and we can actually solve this problem. But what should we call it? So there are some low end anti cheats that some companies have made on their own, right?
CCP just made a new one.
Did they make a new one? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've read up.
Launched. I think it launched a year ago. Their new anti-botting detection tool was launched, and that's pretty much what they're focused on right now. I think they were more manual and hands-on in the past, but this new automation thing seems to be doing the job. It does look as if, I think there is a net reduction in bots, but that could also be because of player behavior having changed. It's unknown, but it's lower than it used to be in the past, and we don't have those big thundering unholy rage ban rounds that we used to have in the past.
So then I guess I'll start with probably my two favorite low, and I'm just going to call them low end cheating systems, or self-coded, whatever you want to call them. But two of them that I have in my notes that I've had experience with. I've had experience working with these kinds of anti-cheats, how to break them, whatnot, whatever. But two of them, the first one is Fair Fight. Fair Fight is an anti-cheat designed for Battlefield games. It was designed. EA hired a third party to make Fair Fight for Battlefield exclusively. Like they didn't know how to code it, but they didn't want to hire somebody like BattleEye, so they kind of went in the middle and hired somebody that knows what they're doing to code what they needed to code. It's like, okay, yes, again, we're not getting into the specifics that certain anti-cheats are trash. Take it from me, I know I've broken them before, but that's not my point. My point is, it's just that CCP can learn a thing or two. Maybe, hopefully, they can learn a thing or two, and these are options that I think can be explored. So for as I was saying with Fair Fight, Fair Fight, Fair Fight kind of has an AI. I guess you would say not really. It works off of an AI, and what it does is every player gets their own profile, right? The anti-cheat creates a profile for every player in the game, and that profile records their statistics. And on a constant basis, this AI is comparing your statistics to the statistics of the average player, of everybody else. So, the average player, let's say 60 kills a game, right? So it compares your KD or something to the average player. And then when it sees a large, and I'm going to say large, spike in those statistics, it flags you. So, like, if the average player gets 60 kills an hour, and somehow you're sitting there with 4,000 kills an hour, and you're just like a brand new account, just bought Battlefield, whatever, it will flag you. And when this flags you, you get entered into a queue. That queue is then manually reviewed by employees of the company. And this is my favorite part of Fair Fight, and this is going to be my last thing, because then they go into whether or not you're really a cheater or not. There is a special feature that they designed for Fair Fight, a feature that I personally like. I find it really cool. At the beginning, as I said, how the bot or external cheating program glues itself on top of the game, right? When it's glued on top of the game, it's hidden. You, as a person sitting at your PC, cannot see that overlay on top of the game. So the Fair Fight anti-cheat program has a screenshot feature. It only lets them screenshot the game, and that was to avoid controversy of screenshotting people's PCs. I'm not going to get into that, but it only screenshots the game. But it's a special type of screenshot that it's almost like taking a picture with the flashlight on. And it turns the flashlight on and makes the botting program viewable. So that the individual person that is reviewing the is he a cheater case, and he's looking at this screenshot, he can see if that botting overlay exists. And if it does, then it's a solidified proof that the person is cheating and they get banned. Punkbuster used to do this as well, but Punkbuster was phased out for Fair Fight, and Fair Fight has a lot of things that Punkbuster still does. It's an amazing feature, and personally, I have only seen it in a couple games, but it's a really cool feature. I find it amazing that they are able to capture something like that without disturbing the PC itself.
But do you actually think this brings on the whole topic of how is this relevant to Eve, and how do we suspect things like an Eve cheat or tools would actually look like, and how they would operate? Because I suspect that it's slightly different, and maybe not the same type of bot technology that's being used in Eve Online, because it's so much more repetitive grind of a very, very lowbrow and simplified version, right?
When I guess you could say investigated is the right word. When I investigated kind of Eve Online and the type of bots people use in Eve Online, which still amaze me how stupidly easy they are. Like, I don't want to say stuff that would promote botting, but the thing is, well, that's a good point. You put me on a good path there. It uses pixel scans, which is it's a stupid method. I'm gonna be honest. It's a stupid method of botting, but a way that CCP could detect these bots, for example, a decent method would be something like the VACnet system. And I'm not, and if you, I'm not going to go too much into detail like I did with Punkbuster and Fair Fight, because there's a whole like 2 hour explanation that Valve did on VACnet and what it does that you can go watch on YouTube that they like showed off. But the premise of VACnet, right, is that it's a machine learning based AI. I was thinking about how I could visualize this for people today. Imagine a security guard, and that security guard is sitting in an office with his security cameras, right? And the security cameras are active games, and that security guard is the AI. So for 2.5 years, Valve sat this security guard system down, and on one monitor played a legitimate player. On the other monitor played a convicted cheater. And basically said, here is a legitimate player, here is a cheating player. Tell us the difference between the two. And the bot learned what the difference was. Through machine learning, learned what the difference was between a legitimate player and a bot player, or a cheating player. And one of the things that the false positives, and yes, I should look at the bads with this too, since a lot of you are bringing them up. Yes, there can be false positives, but this is where time comes in.
But especially, we should maybe touch upon the false positive thing, because it's fairly important, especially since we are Eve players on an Eve stream talking about general botting, but especially how it affects Eve.
I'm sorry, I digress too much. Too much.
No, it's great. It's just I think what I suspect is happening right now is very related to the topic you just mentioned, because bots in Eve are now fundamentally or almost indistinguishable from an Eve player, right? So they are playing almost the same game, and the only tool effectively that CCP has in the toolbox is to figure out how closely they resemble a human being and how they don't, right? This is why I suspect that what the current software that CCP is using is very similar to what you use in banking and financial crime, where you track things that shouldn't be possible. There's, of course, the obvious ones. Most gamers can do a 24-hour stream, right? But they can't do marathoning and no lifing for 7 days a week. At least that's
72 hours.
Yeah. Well, there's just so many hours in a day, and we know from psychology and psychiatrics and neurology that a human being that does not sleep for 7 days goes completely bonkers, right? Massive psychosis. So there's physical limits, and these things are what an AI can scrape in big data form on the server side, right? Look for these patterns where the player is actually behaving in a way that shouldn't actually be possible for a human being. Things like perfect reaction time. Let's just take something like the fact that we know that when we
see that's something. Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but that's what I was kind of getting to with VACnet, because nowadays, right? And I know I'm gonna digress a bit here for a second, but that VACnet, they trained it for 2.5 years. It has currently like a 92 to 98-ish% success rate on determining whether a player is legitimate or a cheater. And one of the first things it looks at is mouse DPI. And when it comes to an FPS game, it gets very precise, right? But with something as simple as Eve, I have seen the videos on YouTube, the public YouTube videos, and it's amazed me that CCP hasn't looked into this, but the fact that there are source codes everywhere for bots of Eve Online and they haven't been dealt with kind of confuses me a bit. But that digressed a little bit. But the point being is that the reaction time, the human hand with a mouse DPI scale can only go so quick. And you might think, oh, the bots have smoothing, the bots have da-da-da-da-da, whatever. But when you are looking at these bots, they literally, like, if I were to pretend for a minute that my screen here is EVE Online, right? And I'm warping to an anomaly and I'm a bot, right? The bot is going to right click here and it's going to freeze. And it's going to freeze on the right click menu for like 5 seconds. And then all of a sudden, the mouse is going to disappear, and a split second later, it's going to appear down here by the asteroid belt.
This is what I meant with superhuman ability, but it's also some of the things that Goonie was pointing out. The fact that even people in EVE Online that are really, really good at the game, right, or in other games that are massively talented and really skilled. So yeah, they fundamentally act a little bit like superhumans compared to everyone else. They aren't perfect, right? Even the really good ones are not perfect. And this is the type of statistics that CCP can basically gather, right? When you jump into a system and you see these players or characters instantly disappear and dock up, right? And they do this all the time, warp out and dock up and completely avoid any kind of hostility. Yes, it's possible, but is it statistically probable that they can do this consistently over days and weeks and all the time, right? And this is why I mentioned financial tools, because I don't know how many people in chat or even yourself, Mifune, have actually ever had the experience of using your credit card and suddenly it just randomly gets blocked. This is not random. This is actually based on algorithms that say, well, you were just using this in California. There is no way you can be in Spain now, right? Because no matter what kind of flight you took, you're not going to get to Spain in 15 minutes. This is some of the very early detection tools that were added in the financial sector. But this is now also massively used in things like whitewashing. This is why I think this is where CCP has moved. And ironically, or funny enough, there's actually at least one person that I know about working for CCP that has a background with looking at forensic data in finances. So they do have the brain power in there to do this, and I do think that they've actually put that in the tool. This is also because one of the things when you're gathering information in a game like EVE, it's very different than the games that Mifune is talking about, because EVE is an ecosystem and an economy, right? That means that it is actually beneficial to gather over a longer period of time. It's also why I suspect that botting, even though some will say that botting is rampant, I don't think it's as big of a problem as in EVE Online as it is in other games. The fundamental problem with EVE Online is some of the design choices that CCP has made when it comes to forces and sinks and AFK gameplay. That opens up to this type of automation. But it's still easier to detect in EVE than it is fundamentally in other games, because you can use forensic tools instead. That means that you're basically gathering data over more time units than you would in other games, right? When you're talking about the anti-botting tools that Mifune explained, they want the information of whether or not this is criminal now. CCP does not necessarily need that. They need to know that these accounts are behaving in this inhuman way that should not be possible. They're gathering value and assets over time on a scale that no other average player is capable of. So, of course, that can be a no-lifer, because we know that EVE players are actually a little bit better and smarter than the bots. We actually move when things change. Bots get antiquated and need to be updated to the new meta or the new design things that CCP introduces. But still, I think this slow banning thing that CCP is doing is maybe a little bit better than, say, massive anti-botting tools. At least that's my suspicion.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something I guess I can definitely agree with. And for the people in the chat, it's like I think there's this mentality. Sorry, there's this mentality in gaming that cheaters will, karma comes around and cheaters will get a ban. And it's just become this thing where they rapidly want it to happen. Someone double clicks their botting.exe and then banned instantly, and that's what people are expecting. And I feel like you're right. From the games I'm talking about, These are the kind of games that I'm talking about where you cheat in the game for 2 hours and you're banned within a week. CCP gathers data over time. That's just the part of Eve. That's part
Yeah.
of the game. And this whole thing of false positives, that's why it takes so long for CCP. Because they make sure that if they ban someone, it's not a freaking false positive.
Yeah, but then they run into their problem, which is kind of funny, and I think Eve players just need to learn to live with. When you have these big numbers of people getting banned, the whole chain, as chat also points out, you still have the problem of culpability, right? Because let's say that you have 200 bots, right, get banned in Oasa, right? What about all the assets? Some of it might be RMT'd out or whatever, and banning those accounts as well makes sense in the chain. But the unknowing and in good faith player that purchase stuff from them at favorable rates cannot be held accountable, right? So if I have bought, let's say I bought 100 billion worth of minerals or loot or something from these guys, right? That's not me doing something wrong. So you can't neg my wallet. You can't take my assets, because unraveling all of that economic activity from these criminals is not just difficult, it's actually also unfair. So CCP is in this endless game of cat and mouse where they need to make sure that they get enough of these so they don't disrupt the ecology, right? The ecosystem of EVE Online is so sensitive to these types of invasive species and overproduction units, because they completely break the competition model of EVE Online, right? If everything is easily available and free, there is no competition. So right now, CCP needs to start thinking, I believe, outside of the box. I think they have a fairly good tool for getting this type of botting behavior, at least at a decent pace. And because of the nature of the game, it really becomes about game design more than it's about competing with or chasing bots.
Yeah, because I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And I guess this brings the tide into the bigger anti cheat methods that CCP can do. Now, I'm going to say right here and right now, these methods would kill botting altogether, but these methods that have been used by other games have also caused controversy that have made headlines in news, right? And the two big ones that I want to touch on, and I'm sure the smart people in the chat will know these Escape from Tarkov. Escape from Tarkov's anti-cheat is incredible. It does everything BattleEye does. It does everything Fair Fight does. It tracks. It's able to track RMT. I don't know how it does it, but they track the real life trading shit that people do for that. It's incredible. And then the second one I want to touch on, because this one I know a little bit more about, is Valorant. And Valorant, which recently came out from Riot, they have their Vanguard anti-cheat system. And I'm not sure if Caleb, you know about Vanguard. But what Vanguard is, it is a kernel level 0 anti-cheat. This anti-cheat system builds itself into your OS. It embeds itself into your Windows so far deep that Vanguard starts up within a millisecond of your BIOS starting. And it does the same thing all the other anti-cheat programs do and more. It completely blocks any kind of injection into the game's memory. It's incredible. It blocks everything. It's unbeatable. It is impossible. It is mathematically and physically impossible. Vanguard was broken in beta, but that shit was fixed within a couple days. I don't want to hear none of that. It is one of the it is one of the best built anti-cheat systems in all of entirety. And I'm not saying CCP should implement something like this. God, no. It'd be a PR nightmare for them if they did that. Hell, they had Riot, League of Legends developers had a hard time freaking going and doing their shit, when they first came out with the beta, everyone freaked out that they were going to get their computers ratted because of it. But it's unbeatable, and I feel like CCP might be able to find a middle ground. They have their anti cheat, their new one, their AI one, which is fantastic and it's great. Um, you don't need you don't need it. It's overkill, and I'm gonna stress that. Something like Vanguard or something like maybe Battle Eye even is a little overkill. I'm just saying, if CCP wanted to stop the problem tomorrow, kill it all, that's how they could do it. But they won't.
And again, as Chad is kind of responding a little bit, is the whole overkill, and when this starts feeling a little bit invasive, or as if CCP might, if CCP decided to put some sort of anti-cheating software in there required for gameplay, how much does that actually mess with our game experience, and how will the player base react? Because again, I honestly believe that even though I'm very much pro any anti-cheating activities, but I think CCP can get a lot of this done by fixing some of the things that are fundamentally too easy in EVE Online when it comes to automation, AFKing, no lifing, sweatshopping, or botting. Right? There are ways to do this that almost creates this self-moderation thing, but I just don't think that the current Rat Fingerich bullshit is the solution. I know that
No.
other games have it as well. The whole you see a bot, you report a bot. That whole police state bullshit. I don't think it's fair on the players.
It's a control tactic. It's a way
Yeah,
for them to make the players feel like they're doing something. And it
yeah.
is true, when in those types of systems, when you report somebody for cheating, they look into it. Like Counter-Strike, it is a confirmed fact with Counter-Strike, the Overwatch system, which is their peer-to-peer cheater review system. If a particular player gets 11 reports, and that is a confirmed 11 reports, that's 2 games worth of getting reported. If a person's Steam account gets reported 11 times, it automatically gets entered into that queue. And that's how those kinds of systems work. They say, you see a cheater, report them. Well, when that account reaches a certain threshold of reports, then it gets sent to their whole peer review process where they look at that person's account and bans
The
them.
problem is that in EVE Online, it's not like in other games, right? It's not the same. When we see other players and their behavior, it is fundamentally not possible to tell if it's a bot or not. I know that some will say, well, I know a bot when I see one. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But just in this house, both me and my significant other have been blamed for being bots so many times on the market because we are actively playing the game, right? So people think that type of behavior is impossible. You can't update your orders that fast, blah, 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 blah. But you can if you've done it a lot and you know how to do it, right? You don't need all of those injection things. You just need to be in the most active markets. That's where you're going to be claimed or blamed for being a bot the most. And it's the same in space. You cannot effectively tell the difference between someone legit doing legit actual VNI ratting or someone that is botting it. It's just almost impossible to tell the difference. And there's going to be way too many false positives if we allow it to be based on fingering each other. And then I don't like the police state attitude, and I will not accept legally, and I think this is also why the Mitani was raging at this, I will not accept one false positive to get 100 bots out. It's not our job, and we should never risk our fellow players that are trying to have fun in the game. So I agree, we should not finger each other. We should not report bots. We should completely ignore that stuff. It's not our job. It's CCP's job.
Exactly. I 100% agree with that because it's true. False positives suck, and they suck bad. And the whole police reporting system does have a flaw with it. I agree with that. It doesn't, which is why I suggest CCP build this AI based stuff. This is going to be a terrible example for anybody that knows coding. But the original Valve anti-cheat, for example, and I hate to bring this back to other games other than Eve, but this is an example of what CCP could do, and I'm sure they already have this in place. But the Valve anti-cheat system, the original one, it scans it's the internal client-sided scan where it scans the game's files for any foreign memory that's being injected into the game's code. And would that kill Eve? No, it wouldn't work for Eve at all. But just it's better than doing something than see something report something. It sucks. So when you think most of these botting programs are external, you have to look at alternatives like a external file scan like BattleEye. That if they wanted to eliminate the bot programs themselves, that's what they would have to look at. It's one of, I wouldn't say it's the only, but it is the only way to 100% ensure the elimination of botters, of all botters. And will cheating continue? Yes, I am going to say this right now. Will cheating continue? Yes, it always will. But that doesn't mean CCP has to make it easy for them. CCP can make it the most sluggish, hard thing to do to get that bot to work. Because as of right now, in games like Diablo, Eve, whatever, to bot, all you have to do is download the exe and double click it, set your settings, and you're fine. Now, when it comes to something like Call of Duty, for example, the latest Call of Duty game, you want to cheat in that? You need an HWID spoofer to avoid the HWID bans. You need the injection method of injecting it into the game. You need extra RAM sticks because when you do get banned, to create a new account, you need to change your hardware ID along with the spoofer by changing out your RAM sticks. You have to add a phone number for every brand new account that they create. Like, there are so many simple methods that CCP could use just to make it a headache to use these bots. You make it a headache instead of easy peasy lemon squeezy, and that can help reduce the amount of people who want to bot. And by doing those little tiny annoying things, they're not annoying to the normal player. Caleb, you how many Eve accounts do you have?
Right now, I only have 3.
Now, would it be a headache for you if you attached all 3 of those to your phone number?
No, I think they already are.
Exactly. You know who it would give a headache to, though? The botters. Because then CCP can add that phone number as a list of things that they ban for. Because as of right now, it's my understanding that when CCP bans a player, they ban the IP and they ban the HWID. And that, while that's impossible, and I'm going to say that with quotes, impossible to come back from, it's pretty possible if you know what you're doing. But
it's also dumb, right? Because
it is dumb.
If you want as CCP as a business, if you want to expand out and have things like Eve on your tablet or Eve on your phone or all of these things, banning on IP is just dumb. That means that if someone has been banned from an IP that's public, I won't be able to play it from that location because it's banned. It's like that's just a dumb way of trying to manage this. They have to do it smarter, and they have to look at their game design instead. I think that is the fundamental, and this is back to the fact that EVE Online is so different than any other game because of its the nature of the sandbox in EVE Online, right? You don't have it in any other game. Of course, there's other PvP games, but then they don't have an ecosystem. There's other ecosystem games, but then they don't have the PvP aspect. There's some that have both, but then they are multiple shards and things like that. There's just nothing like EVE Online. This is why EVE Online should be policed by the nature of the ecosystem, right? This is how it's done. Make it so that these bots can't instantly disappear by just looking at something like local chat or whatever they use, right? Let's get rid of this perfect intel, because it's not good for the players and it's not good for the, well, it's only benefiting the bots, right? For the players, it actually takes away from the gaming experience. I'm not talking about going back to blackout, but we need to start reducing the perfect intel, because if you give perfect intel in the client, that makes the bots so much more powerful. So let's get rid of that stuff. Let's put in the interdependencies instead of this self-sufficiency bullshit. Let's make it so that EVE players always require collaboration with someone else. If not directly, then indirectly by acting with the markets and other things. This is how you make it really difficult for automation, because automation requires perfect spreadsheets and perfect knowledge, right? If they don't have that, they become inefficient and actually dumber and worse than a player, right? And if a bot is crabbing away at an efficiency that's way lower than a player, or just at least on par with the lowest average, I don't really care, right? Then they're just free targets in space. Then they're like
See,
NPCs. It's
uh,
fine.
See, this is one of the this is one thing I wanted to avoid, because the first when we talk about botting in Eve, right? The first thing that comes to every Eve player's mind is CCP changing the game mechanics. The whole point is to think outside the box. They tried changing the game mechanics multiple times, and every time it pisses the players off. And the thing is that we don't want to piss off the normal player. You
But the
don't
problem
want to
is
piss
that
off you want to piss off the people that make the bots, and that's where I was going with the authentication stuff. There are steps.
but that's because players like easy. Players like easy and players like lazy, because that's human nature. So when you give them easy and lazy, they're gonna like it. But this is about power creep and convenience creep and quality of life creep, right? When you okay, the best example that I have from recent time in EVE Online is when I saw someone like Killer B starting to actually mine. This is an offense. This should never fucking happen. When an FC that is dedicated to doing the real content of this game suddenly starts acting like a crab, that's because the game is broken, right? This is because the quality of life and the whole focus on how resource gathering has been developing over the last 4 or 5 years is now at a point where it's not even inconvenience for someone like Killer, right? It's so easy peasy that it's become dumb. We need to get the bottlenecks back. We need to get the work and the chores back, because when we have these things, then everyone needs to figure out what they want to do in the game and what area and specialty and place in the ecosystem they want to have. That means that they have a role in the game. That means that instead of multi-boxing and massive account creep, there will be real players in the game. Real players are better customers than this cannibalization shit that we've had over the past 6 years.
I agree with most of that, and this kind of brings me to the point that I want to pick up at with where I was going with the whole making it a headache. I wouldn't say my goal, but I feel like the mentality needs to shift again from not pissing off the players, the legitimized people, but making it harder for them, for the bots. And there are so many simple things that CCP can do. And I'm going to make a huge point about this. Fortnite. And I know 100 people are gonna flare me.
We
for
lost
this.
100 viewers.
We're just gonna lose it. Okay, so Fortnite, for example, when Fortnite first came out, they did not have an anti-cheat program with the Fortnite beta. There was none. And so the cheaters ran rampant. You know why? Not because it was popular, because this is before Fortnite was popular. Cheating in Fortnite blew up because it was easy. And I will tell you right now, if you go to any cheating forum, public or private, one of the biggest thing that draws cheaters into games is how easy it is to cheat in them. So if we make it harder for people to run things like bots, and I know people are going to say, well, the bots are just going to adapt to this to do that. That is true. Bots will adapt. Cheaters will adapt. That comes to the whole cat and mouse game between developers and cheaters. That's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we have to keep it an easy process for those cheaters, right? There are thousands of things, literally thousands I can list off by the name of things that they can do that are standard procedure to a normal player, but to a bot make all the difference. Things like the phone number attachments, right? And I want to pick off from this. The phone number attachments. You attach your phone number to an account. That account gets banned. Now any other account attached to that phone number also banned, right? And yes, it may be cheap to go out and buy some random SMS number online. Yes, that's possible. But that's more money on the cheater's part. And that's going to bring me into my next thing, is the cost. Like I said earlier, free cheating is just not viable in video games. Any free cheat is going to get a player banned. And when you're thinking of these people that are botting for 72 hours to a week long without stopping, these bots, they don't want to get banned. That's what they're avoiding, right? So when you have these cheats that cost money, how cheap they are plays in to how they do it. For example, your standard cheat for an FPS game is somewhere around $20 to $30 a month. And that is how much those cheaters pay to not get banned, right? When it comes to things like World of Warcraft, Diablo 3, Eve, the most I have seen with my research, the most I have seen is $5. Now, when you take that to something like another FPS game like Rust, for example, a cheat for Rust, $85 a week. A week. And that's expensive. And that is an expense that most cheaters do not want to pay for. So when you make it harder to bot, when you make it harder to execute the things that botters do, you make it more consequential when they get banned. You drive the cost of their cheat up. And all three of those factors play into reducing the fact that people want to bot, and which will eventually overall spill over to how many people bot in general. And it's a point that's important to make, because if CCP added things like the phone number authentication, or they add something like a permanent HWID ban, which I'm pretty sure they already do, when they add things like that into the mix, it all plays a small part in reducing those cheaters. And then the other thing, and the last point I'm going to make with this little segment, is that it makes it harder for the bot developers to adapt, because they're going to have to adapt. When something like Fortnite introduced easy anti-cheat, the guy who developed his cheat now also has to build in another source code for blocking easy anti-cheat and getting around it. That takes time, that takes more of his effort, and that it all just plays into this big pot of reducing the amount of botters. And this is simple stuff. If CCP wanted to, they could add a phone verification to your account. It doesn't matter what phone number you use. You can tie 30 accounts to one phone number. It doesn't matter. That phone number verification is just a system for them to keep track of who owns what, so that they know how many alts you own. And I think that plays into a part that somebody mentioned in the chat of following the ISK trail. That can happen. If there are botters in EVE Online that have their personal cell phone, and they have all 12 of their botting accounts attached to this cell phone, well, guess what then, fuckers? When you get one account banned, they all get banned together.
But this is again back to game design, right? And in EVE Online, almost since the early beginnings, there's been this tendency to brute force it, right? To just add multiple accounts, to just add multiple active accounts, so actual multi-boxing, right? As long as CCP is not willing to actually kill those things and stop that type of gameplay. And I know that some people will be triggered in chat saying, oh, but what if that is my gameplay? Well, if your gameplay is running 12 or more clients, or if your gameplay is using 40 or more accounts, your gameplay is wrong, right? This has killed the growth of the game, because people will not join a game that is this broken when it comes to how to play it, because they need so much knowledge and stuff to get into this whole brute force bullshit. So they will rather go and play another game, right? This is why we're not growing in EVE Online anymore. I know that there's other reasons as well, but this is one of the major factors that chased away actual warm-blooded players. This is why I call this the cannibalization era, because we have many accounts and there's many credit cards being used and CCP is making money, but they're not necessarily getting the net increase in actual numbers of players, because it's just the same players with more accounts, right? So we are now at, I would say, we've at least lost 25% of the player base from the past, right? This is not because they don't want to play the game. Of course, some might not, but it's fundamentally because they have become worthless. If they can be outcompeted by someone with 100 accounts, whether they are doing industry or market stuff or multi-boxing or SP farming or whatever they're doing to get ahead, they have outcompeted the value of the honest player. This is the problem with the game design. CCP needs to look at that once and for all to get this fixed. I like that. Okay, I am perfectly okay with someone multi-boxing 8 accounts. We're talking more than that. I'm okay with someone running 10 accounts to do stuff in game if they really need it, like Spyworks or whatever. I'm fine with that. The problem is that many of the designs of the ecosystem and the economy is so easy to brute force without skin in the game. So let's start with looking at some of the low-hanging fruit. Let's get rid of the instant ISK printing in null space, because it's basically just benefiting the botters, because they will always win over actual honest players. If that was removed, you guys would still get the value if it was something else, something physical and something fungible that needed to be risked and moved around or looted or salvaged. That creates gameplay, that creates activity. If it just goes into a bot's account, I can guarantee you it will make the whole game worse, and it will be reason for RMTing and stealing CCP's money.
But won't that also anger the normal players somewhat, not just the bots? But
yeah,
like, for example,
the player base that have grown accustomed to this and call this quality of life. But more and more of these people, even the ones that have actually taken advantage of these game designs, are now saying, okay, this is broken. This is just dumb. Killer Bee yesterday said to me, okay, the fact that I can replenish 1 to 2 Titans a month with my mining fleet is just dumb. Get rid of it. Fucking kill it.
Right. That is fair. I will say that's a fair thing. But I like what the chat is saying. The bot will adapt, and yes, it will adapt. We've established this. The botters, and everybody else, the bots and normal players alike will adapt to any change CCP makes, even if it's not what it used to be. Like after the super carrier changes and nobody read it in their super carriers, I may not be able to make 75 million ISK every 20 minutes like I used to, but I can still make like 30.
Well, let's talk about another one. Let's get rid of skill point farming, or at least let's get rid of the extractors. You can buy skill points from CCP themselves.
I do agree with that. Like if skill injectors are a thing, which they are, buy them from CCP directly. Screw the whole. Let me have 4 accounts that train CPU Management 5 3 times a month and extract, and then double their fucking profits on the market. No, like get rid of it.
And if you removed NPC bounties in null, right, and went back to something more like what was traditionally called gun mining, where you get loot of the equivalent value. Hell, you can even put some blue loot in there that can be handed in for actual ISK. The point is, now it's something you need to pick up. It's something that requires you to be active, and you can then say, well, bots can do the same. Yeah, well, maybe not so easily if you make sure that the value and the volume in ISK per cubic meter is not efficient. That would mean that the bot would have to sit there and do something that you and I can do very easily, which is look at all these things and say, okay, this is the type of item that's actually worth picking up and this is not. If a bot does that, it just adds more and more things to the AI that human beings actually do as well, if not better.
See, this is something in the chat that I want to point out, because this has been one of my points every time I talk about botting. Nerfing the game mechanics just hurts everybody. And as much as we all agree and disagree with particular topics in game, whatever, when it comes to specifically stopping the bots or making it harder to achieve the botting system, changing game mechanics is not the way to go, because nobody benefits from it. And we have seen time and time again with Blackout, with Quantum Cores, with everything that CCP introduces that is new or nerfs something that is used in major gameplay, it pisses off the player base no matter what, which is why I agree that CCP needs to think out of the box, literally out of EVE Online, and think of what they can do to kill these external programs, to
can I just comment on one thing? Yeah. One thing from chat that really bothers me: the whole fucked salvaging. Right? Well, some people might actually want to specialize in salvaging. This is a valid, actual game activity. So the fact that you don't like that, you might need to actually go and salvage and loot and sort what type of loot you actually want to carry out of your ratting. Well, that's just because we've gone to this lazy mode where we get to do all the things solo and are not dependent on anyone else. The whole point in the old EVE, and I know I sound like a pseudo nostalgic idiot when I say this, a bit of it, but it is true that in the past, more people were required to be involved in any operation in EVE, whether we're talking mining or ratting. The fact that people had to be, at least, to my experience, if you were less than 5 people doing something on scale that was worth something, then you couldn't really do it. And the fact that you can do that now is just a mistake to the game. It's the game being broken. When things get split up in these specialities, we add content. We add interaction with other players. If someone actually needed to come and salvage after there had been ratting or fighting going on, that would be content. Now there's someone that is fundamentally doing the same as mining, just mining actual destroyed assets. All these things are gameplay and content. And the fact that I hear this all the time, well, that's a chore, that's tedium, that's boring. Well, if you want to just press spacebar to have fun and shoot people in the face, there's other games out there that's tons better than EVE Online. So go play those. Don't destroy this game and this game's unique aspects because you don't like to do any work.
I agree with that. I can see that. And yeah, adding complexity is good. It really is.
Not dumb complexity. Just add roles.
Right.
Make it
So,
so that we can be good at one thing and support our other dudes. That's fun. If I'm good at market stuff, if I do market stuff for my organization, then the other guys don't have to do it. If I'm a miner, I mine. The other guys don't have to do it. The point is, I hate the fact that we have so many of what is basically multi-class characters that do everything themselves. And if you have a multi-class functionality in your game that makes you capable of playing uh, both tank, DPS, and healer, what the fuck do you need to group for?
this is the two things I'm going to bring up with what you said. So when it comes to something like looting and picking out salvage and whatnot, on the side of it adds gameplay and complexity, 100% agree with you. The side of that it would make it harder for bots, yes, it would make it harder for bots. But do you know how easy it is for a bot to sort this loot table stuff? Because I believe a very good example of this would be Diablo 3. And I know a lot of veteran players probably hate Diablo 3 because Diablo 2 is better. But the point being, in Diablo 3, there's over 14,000 something unique items within that game that you can get from the loot table in that game. The popular botting programs for Diablo can sort each individual item. You can pick every individual item out of that 14,000 and select yes or no whether or not you want to loot that item.
And that's
And
true in any other game. In EVE Online, it's not entirely true because everything changes. This is why we need to get things like volatility back in the game and geographic location being meaningful again. Because then those loot tables, of course, you can always go for the purple loot, but that also adds risk because you need to ship it around or you need to have a buyer. And these things do not trade in the same volume as, say, other items. And maybe that's not really what you need. Maybe you just need to effectively gun mine and you need tritanium, so you're going to have to figure out which items have the most tritanium, and then you're going to have to figure out how to logistically get it out of the belt because your ship cannot carry that much. There's so many things and so many factors about what value ends up on the field, whether it's beneficial for salvagers, beneficial for gun mining, beneficial for rare drops. You can't just cherry pick. And I know that that can be done in other games, but in EVE Online, it's not that simple. Especially not if we get the classic complexity back in the game. And I'm not talking dumb complexity. I'm just talking about things like availability of specific resources should be different in different parts of space.
it would be simple. I agree with the chat. I agree that using a program that would be simple, but I think that brings it back to the whole idea of when we're looking in terms of right now and such when it comes to botting, we can't just kill it. Because if they wanted to, they could. If they wanted to, CCP could pay money and have Battle Eye added to Eve, and we'd be done with botting. But that's not what's going to happen because of other things. So
And then
what we got
can I
to,
just
yeah,
can I just mention one thing about this, because everyone keeps saying, well, bots can do this and bots can do that and bots can do everything. Yes, bots can do everything. I know this. I know how programming works. The point is, many of these bots are written by individuals, right? It's not written by a small group of 5 coders or even 10 coders. So when you start adding complexity, the skill level or the abilities of the bots becomes more and more complex. And just from looking at how difficult it is to do third-party tools in EVE Online, right? Tools that can actually manage your assets, look at price developments on the market, all of these things. It takes a lot of work to do these things, right? And if you are suddenly starting to require a bot to have the same type of knowledge, that's not something that most bot coders will make. They won't bother. It's just too much hassle, and there's not enough money in EVE Online to make it worth it.
so it's something I'm gonna have to disagree with you on because yes, it will add complexity to these cheat developers. But not enough. It just won't. And I will. And Caleb, you know me, with my experience in that market, with other games that are not Eve Online, but cheat developers adapt, and most of them adapt quickly. I will tell you this from, I guess you could say, experience. 3 months ago, I'm going to use Counter Strike as yet another example. I know it's an FPS, it's different, whatever. But 3 months ago in CSGO, they added a thing that they called Trusted Mode. It was a way to indirectly hurt cheaters by disabling third party files within official Valve servers. So when I inject my code into something like Counter Strike, most of these cheaters disguise that code as an add-on of some sort, right? And that can be very easily done in a number of games, but then again, this is not Eve. But the point being is that they blocked it. So the thing is that they killed what we called it's called manual map injection. I'm not exactly 100% sure how it works, so I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm not that freaking smart with it, but it killed manual map injection, right? Yes, I know bots don't use injection. That's not where I'm going with this. What I'm going at was that it killed manual map injection, so the CSGO cheaters had to find a new way to inject their cheats. They set it on load library injection, and it killed the cheating in Counter-Strike for a grand total of an hour before the cheats were back up and running with this new injection method. That took them an hour, and I can tell you right now, when it comes to the CSGO cheating world, there is maybe 30 coders that know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to that game and its cheating programs. Now, when you have Eve, the thing is that when it comes to Eve, yes, these bot developers are only singular people, but they also know what they're doing, and they know where they can get help, like the cheating forums. There are so many places that these bot developers can go to easily break the bot in a different way to get the same effect they did pre whatever CCP changed the game mechanic to. And exactly, it is a channel. It's a challenge for most coders. They use it for kicks. I know, but the whole thing of changing these game mechanics and making it more complex, will it be a headache for the botters? Yes. Will it be a permanent headache? No. It could be a headache
Yes,
for
it will.
maybe a week.
Yes, because Eve is a simulation game, so it has options that makes it really, really difficult for bots to survive, because otherwise they just have to live with and accept the same conditions as a player. One of the examples that I believe would change things a lot, I did mention the bounty payout going directly to a wallet and being unassailable wealth. That makes it really easy for botters. Another one is if you had a responsive ecology where when you over farm an area, say of resources, they basically stop yielding anything, and you have to put down something like structures to actually do moon mining. Then you have something that's assailable. That means something that a neighbor can attack, and that is a conflict driver in the game. And bots can't really do social engineering. They can't do wars. They can't do conflict, at least not on a scale that makes sense. So it would only require a 10-man group to start cleaning out botting empires, because they're dumb, right? And this is what I mean about Eve is different than other games, because the economy and the ecology is a simulation. That's not something that's present in any other game. So even bots will actually potentially be destructive to the ecosystem, but in a way that also destroys things for themselves. So the impact of bots would actually end up being almost positive, because they could add gameplay, but they would not be able to compete with human individuals or with human groups.
But they wouldn't care. That's the thing. The bots, you got to think the bots don't.
But they're like cows on a field of grass. If they are not moving around, they will die because the grass will not grow back. If you overgraze, this is what happens in ecosystems. If you overgraze, the grass will not grow back. That's why in nature, when you do not have a fence, right, or you do not have vertical farms and shit like that, what happens is nature dies, right? And when nature dies, the thing that feeds on it dies as well. And this is the type of stuff we need in EVE Online. And these things are not as complicated to code as some people might think. It's actually fairly simple algorithms where if one thing is above another, then the yield and the diminishing return just starts kicking in. And this is something that humans can adapt to very easily, bots not so much.
I could see that. I could see that.
Because it's carrying capacity, right? You live in Delve, right? You know what caused the massive problem of EVE's stagnation. It's pretty much the vertical farming in anomalies, right? You can keep cycling these things forever, and they just keep coming back with more and more assets. And it's even more toxic in EVE Echoes right now. And this is just the whole problem with accretion, with power creep, with asset and resource creep. It's that as long as you have these faucets that are fundamentally infinite and you can always brute force them, and there's no skin in the game, there's no risk, there's no diminishing returns, there's no way of actually removing them, this is where we go, right? This is what the game does. This is also why bots work in all other games. But in CCP's ecosystem, it could actually be removed just by game design.
I could see it helping the problem. I'll tell you that much.
Well, this is why I say you call it help, but I will say I don't mind if it's a robot cow or a human cow. If I can't tell the difference, and it does the same thing, and I can kill it in the same ways, I don't really see it as that much of a problem. I keep calling them NPCs, and I'm okay with NPCs, especially if someone is actually paying CCP money for having access to playing an NPC.
You are not wrong. I can see that. Definitely.
Because the problem with some of these grinding bots, right, in other games as well, is that if I try to engage them and try to shoot them, they just disappear. It's like, how the fuck did that happen?
Well, I believe and I thought about bringing this up, and I think it would be a funny little story. Before this whole war started, way before, I believe it would be last year would be the big one. As a skirmish commander for goons, right? And this is a little bit of a story time, just to digress a little bit. When I was a skirmish commander during peacetime, we would just take random fleets into catch to see if Brave would fight, screw around a bit. And the thing was is that on the trip, and those who know what I'm talking about will know what I'm talking about. On the trip between Delve and Catch, there's that pipe by FAT, right? Now, in that pipe, there was a particular end system in this little, 4-system square. Now, this one system had so much NPC kills. It was always, 9,000 plus on dot land. It was amazing, right? And the thing was is that when you enter that system, full of bubbles. Just, the gate was anchored bubbles galore. And when you look at the kill mails for that system, all you see are these smart bombing materials with the guy with the same name. So you think to yourself, I wonder. So the next thing you know, after a couple months pass, right, I noticed that one of this guy's characters get banned. And soon to follow, 3 of them other get banned. But, there were 4 of them that weren't banned at the time. Next thing you know, his botting system, he moved out of there and moved to another system. And then, not even a week after moving into that system, banned all of them. And I believe, I'm going to say that's evidence, yes, CCP is trying. And I feel like I want to stress this at this point, that CCP is trying. And they are trying. And I wouldn't say gotta put faith in them, but we gotta also have their side of things. You gotta think of their position with them being the developers of a game. I feel like we haven't touched on this. uh,
Well,
yet, but like from their
recently
perspective.
they brought in an economics team, and I think that's commendable, and it's very important for directing the whole design choices in the future. But their team security is also well, just developed a new tool. They're still settling in and figuring out how to actually move forward with this. We haven't seen an unholy rage, but I would be very surprised if we do not actually see one before quarter 1. I think there's a big unholy rage banning round coming in very, very soon.
Just like a
Uh,
whole ban wave that they're gonna do. You
yeah,
think?
there's gonna because right now you're seeing, of course, some of it is legit. I'm not saying it's not. There's plenty of the stuff that's going on right now that's legit, um, but it is massively propped up by automation of some kind. These numbers that we're seeing in some regions, and some of the players that we know have come into the game. This is okay. This is back to way back when the Russians were being blamed for doing this, right? And they did. There was a lot of, because Russians are really good coders historically, so they're like prone to this. And okay, the circles that have hackers in history used to be a certain number of nationalities. This has, of course, expanded while the internet was expanding, and everyone suddenly got it. But the people that did botting and stuff in the very early days of EVE Online were people like the Scandies, people like the Dutch, people like the Russians, a lot, right? This is just fact. And this is not really racism or anything like that. They did it because they had a lot of hackers. And hackers see this, as I think you pointed out before the show, as a challenge, right? Can I do this? Can I get this to work? Can I break their security? Can I break their game? It's also a very goon thing to break the game, right? So this is what we're seeing now. We have someone coming in from especially from Korea and from China, massively, because the whole push into those markets have started from CCP. So they're coming in, they have a culture, they have experience with these things, and they're used to very grindy games where it's almost expected and legit to do automation of some sort of some kind, right? So the fact that these people might actually still be doing some of these things is not really reaching. And we are seeing numbers that I do not call realistic. And I do think that will lead to a massive ban wave. I think it's going to come after the war, because CCP can't really do it in the middle of a war, especially if it potentially looks as if it's biased towards someone. And this is back to something that Peligro showed us last year. Very controversial, but it's basically CCP's data. So you can, of course, argue with that and say that this is goonsplaining. But statistically, the Imperium or goons back then had the lowest number of percentage bans of any group. And this is again because, first of all, they have a different social culture. They don't do renting, or they don't like renting. So they don't have to necessarily police anything, because they don't have these unknowns in their space. This is what renter models do. They end up with people that they can't police, and they do not know if they are botting or not. It's not in their interest to even look at it, because they just want the renter fees, right? You can then say that, are they to blame? Like Ritati says, that we should blame the leadership or the alliances that allow these things to go on. I don't think so, not at all. Again, it's not up to the players to police on things like automation or breaking the rules. That's CCP's job, and it should not fall back in the face of even a silent leader that says, well, I don't give a shit if they do it or not, as long as I get my ISK. I think that's a valid argument. He should only care about that. That's his only interest. How they get it is up to them, and it's up to CCP to figure out if that's legal or not.
I definitely okay, and my OBS is killing itself. Fun times. My OBS just decided to kill itself for whatever reason.
No.
It was that okay. I'm sorry. My OBS just decided to screw itself. Whatever. Anyway, I agree with you. I completely agree that it's not the player's fault. and that's why I went towards that whole thing earlier about going after the bot owners and the people that develop the bot and the bot itself rather than banning these players, because then you just you kill the kingpin, and you kill the whole mob, right? But like when it comes to these the things that I wanted to address in the chat, that surely if botting affects the war, shouldn't CCP do something about it? I don't think they should, um, because the problem with that is that CCP has done that before. They've interfered in the middle of wars before, and it has screwed over the player base. They introduced Blackout. They did the Drifters thing during the burning of Tribute last year, and players went nuts over it. Half the player base practically quit the game because of that. And all because it was in the middle of a war with no testing and no pre-announcement on like 3 months of testing on CC or whatever, right? But and it's not just about gameplay mechanics versus botting there. The point being is that they can't interfere with the player base, and that comes into Eve's uniqueness and CCP's whole rule, how the developers can partake in the game but they can't influence the game. That's the whole point. If something like the bubble bug, the bug that allows people to avoid the bubbles that Kosicek has explained to me a million times that I still don't understand how the hell they do it, but they do something that avoids getting a bubble when it's on a gate, and you can like just burn right through the bubble and get to the gate or whatever. But one of the reasons CCP hasn't addressed or fixed it yet is because it's war. Like it's going to tip the scales of the war in such a way that people are going to get upset. Hell, people were outraged that the KVN node died during that Q-Star fight and the Q-Star repaired. Do you know how many people begged CCP to force that Keep Star to go back to Armor Timer so that they could have another chance, because the server crashing ruined it for them and ruined their chance of having the fight, and it basically killed their chance of winning it? Doing something like Caleb is suggesting, and obviously we're not pointing fingers, but when you have a entire alliance botting in this game, I'm not going to name names because there are people in that alliance that do not bot. But
let me just point out that, okay, let's say that it is 3%, 3 times more likely that there's botters in groups outside of the Imperium. But that still doesn't mean that there's not bots in the Imperium. And again, in the middle of the war, you really don't want an unholy rage and the potential of neck walleting and unraveling and removing assets and stuff like that. It's too much of a mess for any side. So CCP should really stay out and not do anything like that until the other side. And of course, people will say, well, then every time there's a war, then there's no bot bans. Of course, there's going to be bot bans. I'm not talking about a normal bot ban. I'm talking about taking that data that I talked about earlier, that is basically financial forensic stuff, looking at it and saying, okay, all of these 2,500 accounts are going to get banned instantly. That's a lot. And all the potential ramifications economically and assets-wise, you don't want that in the middle of a war. You want to do that on a trickle, but then it becomes a little bit of a warning thing, and then they start hiding their money. This is just something that EVE players know how to do. It doesn't help that CCP keeps giving us tools to do it, so we make it easier and easier to actually do RMT. Segue.
Caleb,
The point is, you should not do this when there's something really big, meaningful, and historic happening in EVE Online. It's just a mistake. CCP, stay the fuck out. You've already added too many changes. You've already introduced too many new things during this very, very critical phase of the game. Please stagger your content and your rollout, because if you're messing with the real game because you want your PvE stuff and all that shenanigan into the game, you're destroying it. Because the real Eve Online is what happens between the players. Everything else
So,
is just
Caleb,
set decoration.
question. I'm going to ask you this because I was not around for the last Casino War. During the last Casino War, the online casinos, were they banned? Did CCP, throw down that hammer during that war, or was it after that war?
After the war. Well, no, wait a
Exactly.
minute. Yeah, it was just after. Soma was banned before
Some,
or
but like
during.
spotty
No,
throughout there, but they really hammered on it after the war, correct?
yeah, the I Want Is guys was after the war, but I do think that Soma Blink was actually banned during or before the war. And then of course all casino stuff and all gambling was made illegal after that. So it was
So
like a three-step thing.
that's exactly what Caleb is saying, guys. It's the same thing. It's history repeating itself. Bots are still going to get banned throughout this war. It's already happened. Bots probably get banned every other couple days, right? But what Caleb is talking about is CCP taking not necessarily a break, but CCP, the war ends, and then CCP looks at all the data throughout the war and realizes that 2,000 people were making 800 billion isk a day. Like, not legitimately, that's a total exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And I hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. And what Caleb is saying is that back with the first casino war, they addressed the issue during the war, but go they didn't fully put their boot on the floor until after the war. Because if they did during the war, then it would tip the scales of the war. And that has happened with every major CCP change, whether it be bots, whether it be casinos, whether it be gameplay changes. It has been a proven fact time and time again by that when you make any kind of major change like that in the middle of a war that the entirety of nullsec is a part of, then that screws over both sides. And
Yeah,
it
and again, back to what I talked about a little bit earlier, and chat was kind of disagreeing with me because they think that it's like in the real world, like dirty money in the real world. You should, in some sense, be accountable by just dealing with the people with the dirty money, right? Just like with actual stolen goods. If you're buying a TV at a tenth of the price, you are basically expected to understand that this is not the real value. But in Eve, you can't do that because there's not the whole. There's no serial numbers on items in Eve. There's no way for you to know whether someone is questionable or gives you a legitimate receipt on things and pays his taxes. It's just not how Eve works. In Eve, everything is fungible. You can't tell the difference between a keep star in Delve and a keep star in Oasa. They're the same, right? Everything is fundamentally exactly the same. So when someone hands you a keep star for the war effort, whether that is to drop in 1DQ or to create a chain of keep stars all the way down to Iridia, you can't be expected to know where it comes from or how it was sourced, right? That's not your job. Again, this is back to you're not asking for the tax receipts from every individual that you deal with in Eve Online. So you're never expected to be responsible for that. Of course, if someone gives you 5 keep stars for free, or eBay free, I don't know, PayPal free, that's a different story, right? Completely different story. Then you're basically involved in a criminal act. But if it's part of a bigger organization, you can't be expected to check everything and do all that auditing. This is CCP's job, and this is why you can't pull out and yank out all the dirty stuff in the middle of a war, because that would be equivalent to uh, pulling out almost perfect cash counterfeit in real life from everyone that's actually dealt with them. If it's perfect cash, you can't be expected to know that it's fake, right? That's the government's responsibility. And if you suddenly go around to every single individual that got a few $1,000s or a few £100 and then just take it out of their wallet, you're crashing the economy because these people thought that that was legit money.
And the other point that I want to bring up here, especially to the people that keep saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter, they're cheaters, ban them." We're not saying don't ban them. Yes, ban the cheaters, get rid of them. I want that too. Everybody wants them to ban the cheaters, which they will do. It just takes time and patience, just like the rest of Eve. Like Caleb said, there is no other game like Eve. This is not World of Warcraft. This is not Valorant where you get banned the second you even try to cheat. This isn't like any of that. It takes time to collect data to make sure that they're real cheaters, and then after that, then they can ban them. And we're not saying don't ban them during the war. Yes, ban them during the war, but there is probably what's going to happen is that what CCP does is they take data and they look at this data from 2-3 months ago, right? And then that's what they go off of for botters and stuff. That's why it takes so long to happen, right? So this war is going to end. And when this war does end, CCP will look at the data from during the wartime. Because right now, when CCP is looking at botters, when they're looking at botters, they're not looking at botters that made a billion ISK today. They're looking at botters that made a billion ISK 2 weeks ago, and those are the botters that get banned. And then the botter that made a billion ISK today, he's going to get banned 2 weeks down the line. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to be a chain reaction of the war ending, CCP looking at the data, and then all the massive bandwave of all the botters that from the war. And that's how it's going to work. Like
The really interesting thing is how big it's going to be, because right now we keep talking about war. I think we should let it start before we start talking about it as a war, because I'm pretty sure that it's only been like sneaking and creeping up to an actual war. So let's get the war started before we start talking about after the war. But it will be after the war, right? And
yeah, it'll
I
be
don't know.
after the conflict.
Yeah, and I don't know how big it's going to be, and I don't know how much patience Team Security will have, because if they've already collected a lot of data, they might actually want to do the unholy rage thing um, before the bots cash out and recycle and all that stuff. So I don't know if it's going to be at the end of the war. It could actually happen in the middle of it, especially if the war keeps being this slow, because they can't ignore something like this. I don't think I don't know what scale those numbers that we're seeing on the MER and the activity, how much of that is legit. A lot of it could be. Let's say 75% of it is completely legit. That still leaves a lot of not legit activity, and that needs to be removed.
That's pretty good. So we are approaching 2 hours, Caleb. Do you think
Yeah, we should.
we've covered everything pretty much?
I think we did, and again, this is back to what we started with. I feel like this is very much a rerun of the first Casino War, of course, with a lot of differences with where it's actually happening, but it's still, it has some of the same flavor, some of the same drama, the same type of hooliganism is what I call it, with these groups that just hate each other without actually understanding why they hate each other, and the direction of hate. I was saying in another chat in voice today that, to me, and this is not just because I'm a Goon fan, but when I look at Eve history, all of Eve history, it's really the history of the Goons, right? That might offend a lot of people, but if you talk to someone that do actual history or history book writing, Eve's history is fundamentally about goons and all their encounters and challenges throughout Eve history. And now we're on phase 2 of this existential threat narrative. But again, dirty money is involved. It's going to have consequences. And I think because of that, it might actually be one of the things that makes sure and leads to the Imperium growing into something new and even more interesting on the other side. Of course, it might actually lose half of its members and get completely stomped in Delve, but anyone that thinks that goons are going to go away are deluded, because EVE Online's history is the history of the goons.
I agree with that. That's pretty, yeah. So, I guess, is that your closing remarks, you think? For
Yeah, I don't think I can
today?
trigger people more than that. I think that's the maximum trigger I can bring to this show.
So, I think what I'm going to wrap up with is hopefully people who don't have any idea of what botting can cause and how it hurts the game or solutions to solve it or anything like that, I hope you feel educated. I hope you do, because that was my original intent with this, is to educate people on this issue and hopefully bring everybody together to combat this issue. In other things, I hope that those who know far much more than I do, I hope you had some fun listening to me trying to explain complicated concepts of injection of DLLs and running of external files and overlays and things like that. I hope you got a good laugh out of it, because personally, I think I did it hilarity.
Oh, I have a small thing,
Yeah.
just to moderate myself earlier. If you suspect that some of your fellow Imperium dudes are actually botting, the people that you report that to is the directors. It's your own people, and they decide what to do with that intel. That's the direction, not CCP.
Yeah, that's true. If they're in the Imperium and they're botting, and like or you suspect or whatever, go to your directors. They'll handle it. Okay, they will handle it. And I know that for a fact because I know many of the directors, and they do not want botters. Yeah, just ban all the cheaters. Just get rid of them. Ban everybody. No game anymore. Goodbye. No. But in all seriousness, I hope you guys did have a good time with this discussion. And I hope you'll look back on this someday in the glorious utopia of botters never existing in EVE Online and all cheaters banned. And it's a perfect utopia where there are no cheaters ever and everybody can have a fun time. Otherwise, I hope you guys had fun overall. And I hope you all have a wonderful Friday night. It's probably Saturday morning for some of you, if any of you are EU and still awake. But I hope y'all have a great night, and I hope y'all had fun listening to us.
And tomorrow we're back with the normal push to talk schedule, where we will just shoot the breeze and shit talk as usual, and not this serious stuff.
Alrighty, good night, everybody. I don't have my outro slotted for you, OBS right now, so ha ha ha.